Hi, I'm Jeff Scoop with my co-host Jen Kreis, and this is Beyond Barriers podcast. And our special guest today is Isaiah Perez from South Korea. Isaiah, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I want to first and foremost thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it and looking forward to a great talk.
Absolutely. Hey, I've been a guest on your podcast. I want to give the listeners a little bit of background on Isaiah and what he does. He has a podcast called Respect, Humility, and Empathy, and it's well worth checking out. It's an awesome program. The guests are phenomenal, and it's all about respect, humility, and empathy, just like it says in the title. It's a phenomenal podcast. Please check it out, and we will put links to that in the description as well, so people can check it out. If you would, tell us a little bit about your podcast. What got you started? The kind of what inspires you? What got you going on that?
Well, I'm sure you know a gentleman by the name of Daryl Davis, and I could genuinely, legitimately say he is 100% the inspiration for the podcast. I would say maybe about like 5 or 6 years ago, I'm a Christian, and I was a former like atheist. And I wind up joining this atheist group, society online, and I saw some debates going on and stuff, some really disrespectful stuff. And I actually went to one of their organizations to they're actually having a pizza party out of all things. And there's one guy specifically I'd wanted to debate, and when I went in there, like I sought him out. But we're in a pizza parlor, so we actually sat down, had a pizza, and a few pictures of beer, and he was there with his wife and daughter, and we actually got so caught up in the conversation, like we just totally forgot to even debate about God or religion or anything like that. So yeah, sometime later, I would say around a year later, we decided to do a podcast where we have a Christian and an atheist just sitting down and talking to people from other faiths. And yeah, it's been about 2 years now, and yeah, as you said, we've had some amazing guests. And it's been a very, it's been a very worthwhile endeavor, I would say.
So you're still doing the podcast with you as a Christian and him as an atheist?
Actually, he had some other things going on in his life, started some other stuff going on, but I definitely do still have an atheist as co-host. And actually, we'll be going live. I'll be going live tomorrow from Itaewon. I'm sure you've heard of the disaster that recently happened. So I do have a friend who is she was there and she was trying to help out some of the people. 3 of them died like right in front of her, like during CPR.
Explain, if you could explain that disaster though, Isaiah, because a lot of the people, the news over here is a lot of times focused on all kinds of strange things, and they don't cover world news very often. So if you could explain what all went down there.
Well, so first and foremost, start off say South Korea has the population of Oregon, Washington, and California basically smushed into a size of like less than half of Oregon. So try to imagine that. So as it is extremely crowded. Seoul is one of the most densely populated places on the planet, including all the suburbs. It's something like 20 million people. There's only like 10 million people in Seoul, but there's a lot of suburbs. So if you ride around the subways at certain times, like in Gangnam, the kind of crowds that you saw in there, you could literally see those just like on a daily basis. So already there's an element of overcrowding. The unfortunate thing about COVID, apart from all the tragedy that it brought, was that a lot of people couldn't do a lot of things that they wanted to do for a very long time. So for example, I attended the firework display, a firework show in a place called Yeouido, and literally this is the first time they did it in 3 years. So literally a million people came out to. I've never seen so many people in my life. And so this event, this tragedy, I should say in part has to do with the fact that people were just so excited to get out from these COVID restrictions. And so just way more people came. I mean, I would say that place, because I used to live there, I would say around 20, maybe 30,000 would be the absolute top you could fit into that area. And so it was like a perfect storm of a lot of different events and factors that went into it. And I will say this, it is an absolute international tragedy because of the fact that people from, I believe, 15 different countries lost their lives. It wasn't just South Korean people. 2 Americans died, in fact, but you had people from Japan, Europe. So yeah, it's an all-around tragedy. And we'll be live streaming tomorrow, raising money for to help my friend get some mental health help that she needs for counseling.
So, I mean, I know what happened, but for the listening audience, just assuming that they don't know what exactly took place there. So this large group of people got together for a fireworks show. Was that it?
No. The fireworks show happened like 3 weeks ago. I was just giving that as like an example of a million. I've never seen so many people in my life. They came out to like a park area. This was like a small town area. They didn't even block off the traffic or anything. Yeah, basically, actually, when I heard that there was a stampede, maybe I thought there's no way that would actually happen in South Korea because they tend to be more docile and like calm people. But when I saw what actually happened, people just kind of like a sea of people was like moving, and the people in the middle got crushed essentially. So especially because it's on an incline. And yeah, it was just a really, really unfortunate event. 150 people lost their lives. So until Saturday, we're still in a period of national mourning here in South Korea. So it's a very tragic event.
Well, what was it that set the people off where they all started stampeding? Because that's I heard about that in the news here. But what was it that would cause something like that? Just that.
That's the thing. It wasn't a stampede. Like a stampede would imply that people were like rushing through. And normally what happens is that people fall down and get trampled. And that's like not really what happened. What you had was the people in the middle. There was just so many. It's on an incline. You have people in the back, and I guess they just couldn't move fast enough. Maybe some people fell in the front. And to be quite honest, I don't think anybody knows exactly what happened right now. There's still a research the area is still blocked off, and they're still taking pictures of everything. So there's been a lot of theories floating out right now, but I don't think anybody knows for 100% sure. You know, some people said it might have been a celebrity in there. I'm sure alcohol has played some kind of role. It's really a party area. So, but I don't know. They're gonna have to do some research into this.
Well, that's really cool that you're raising funds for somebody that was there, that was traumatized by the event, and that's kind of an ongoing theme with your program, that you're helping out quite a few different people. And I know we've talked because we know each other, and you've talked about some of the things and where your mission has brought you across the world, and some of the different things that you do. I'm thinking specifically about a trip that you made to the Holy Land, and some, that's an interesting story. So I was going to ask you about that, but just in general, like some of the things that you're doing that help others, I think it's really important to focus on that and to share with the listening audience some of what you do, because I think it's incredible.
Well, I will tell you this. I was in college during September 11th, and I remember feeling a desire to blame somebody. And I remember feeling very, very anti-Muslim, very anti-Islamic, and wanting to hurt those people wherever I could see them. And I think I'd only met one Muslim in my life at that point. Moving to South Korea, one of my best friends here actually wind up meeting, and he's a Muslim from Egypt, and we've helped each other out. He helped me out in a very, very difficult time, and specifically going to the Holy Land, just kind of an amazing series of events where I actually went into Palestine and got to stay at a mosque for a week with Muslims, and I found them to be the most gentle, hospitable, kind, welcoming, humble people I've ever met in my life. And it was an amazing experience, and it humanized them in a way that I couldn't have imagined, just seeing people on movies or on TV. And actually, I do share a story about it in a book that that I'm writing right now. But as I'm sitting there, I saw the quarter out of my eye. I was hanging out with some of them, and a guy picked up an axe and like made his way behind me. And in like a split second, I saw my whole life flash before my eyes, and I thought, "Oh my God, I'm about to die right now." And I started praying to God, like to receive my spirit kindly. And he picked up the axe and just started chopping some wood behind me and added it to the fire. And I'm like, "Oh my God, this has been like socialized inside of me, this type of hatred and the fear of these people." And yet they were I've met people all over the world. These guys are the kindest, most gentle people I've ever met. And I can say that with a straight face, as a Christian. So yeah.
I was just thinking back to 9/11 when that happened, and thinking to myself, if I remember feeling any anger or hatred, towards Muslims because of all of that. And I can honestly say I didn't feel that, because I don't know, I've always just looked at people as individuals, and I know that there's good and bad in every race or religion or anything like that. So
Good for you.
but I do understand people that did have that fear at the time. I definitely understand that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common, Isaiah, as far as having these unfortunately, those of us that were in the movement too, like we judge people without knowing them and
Right.
and things like that. So do you think that experience helped you with is that one of the many things that helped inspire the podcast and then the work that you're doing?
Well, prior to that, I would say that it's funny. I was just talking to a guy yesterday. One of my coworkers has Turkish blood in him, and we were talking about like Turkey is genetically one of the most diverse countries in the world, and specifically Istanbul. You could go there, and I told him I saw parents with their kids who like their kids look nothing like them. Like I've never been to a country before where the kids look nothing like, you know, nothing like their parents. And then you would see stuff like very Asianist looking people, because Istanbul is half in Europe and half in Asia. And then also you would see guys who look very white, but they had more Asian eyes. And I just never seen that level of diversity in people before. And I told them too, they're really tolerant. You could see a woman dressed, I'm not sure exactly what the covering, where it's like head to toe black. I'm not sure
Burqa,
I'm sure that
with the
what's it
burqa
called?
and it's
A
called the
burqa?
headdress is called a burqa. Yeah.
Well, then you'd also see the hijab, like you'd see that dress, another woman with that, and then you'd see another woman walking around with a mini skirt and high heels right next to her with nothing on. So that level of I've gotten to interact with them like in places like Kosovo, where you go there to mosque and it's nothing but blonde hair, blue eyed people, because we get so much in our mind thinking that Muslims are like just they're Arabic, but the vast majority of Muslims don't even live inside of the Middle East. Like the largest Muslim country in the planet is Indonesia, and they have something like 200 million people there. And if you ever meet those people, they aren't the slightest bit interested in terrorism or hurting people. They're just going about their lives and ordinary people. And you don't ever see those kind of things where, personally, I went to Egypt, and I'll tell you this, I did get followed around by guys in vans in Egypt, but they're all trying to get my money. They weren't trying to take my life. They're trying to take my money. Like they wanted to drive me around or get some kind of commissions on stuff. So yeah, you have, obviously there's bad apples in every group, but nobody wants to be judged by the extremes, whether you're white, black, Indian, Mexican, whatever it might be. There's certainly bad apples in every group, and we would be remiss to not mention the fact that there's bad elements in that group, but there is in every group, and no one wants to be associated with that. Whether or not you're a police officer or just a person just trying to live your life. Most people don't lie on these extremes. And that's been my case, to see that I've seen humanity, that, these people have families, they have livelihoods that they're trying to protect. And most people just want to create a better life for their children than they had themselves growing up. And I found that to be so universal around the planet. no matter where I've been.
Do you think, and who do you think, or what do you think is the cause of that? Because we deal with a lot of that too, with a lot of the people that we work with. They'll say like they had a bad experience with somebody of a different race or a different culture or religion, and then they like automatically think that all of them are like that. But as you know, from your travels around the world and things like that, it's not that way. And I used to think that way too. But so I'm just curious what you think is the cause of that. Do you think it's something to do with the media putting out just angry stories, like in the case of the Muslims, like about the terrorist bombings or things like that? Or do you think it's something else?
Well, I think it's a combination of things that certainly plays a role in it. If you look at like media and stuff, like if your only exposure to Muslims is seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger or Chuck Norris killing them on TV, of course you're going to have some kind of negative view. I mean, I had those same exact things about French people, for example, because whenever you see them in movies, they're very, they're like very snooty or judgmental. And I had very negative images, stereotypes about French people, and I'd never met any. And I'm a member of a website called Couchsurfing, where you literally get to host people from all over the world, and they get to come into your house, and you get to share meals with them, share experiences. And so there's been several times, like when I went to the Holy Land, I just stayed with the people. One of the guys lived in like a goat farm, and I had hosted him before. So I went and stayed with him for a week on a goat farm, and he took me to meet some Bedouins and stuff. So it was quite an amazing experience. But I've got to have those kind of experiences because I've put myself out there and I've let people stay with me. I've got to meet people from all over the world. So I would say this: some of it has to do with the media, but the other reality is that as humans, we form patterns. If we have an experience, let's say we get jumped by a bunch of Mexicans or Black people, of course that's going to put a natural aversion to these people. You have a couple of bad experiences, of course that's going to be the case. I was very fortunate to grow up in an area where it was Blacks, Mexicans, and Latinos all living together. And it's actually Bakersfield, if you know anything about that, it's where the people from Oklahoma came over in the Dust Bowl. And so the Grapes of Wrath is like literally our backyard. And so the white people there they went by something called like a peckerwood, where like a low income white person. And like my best friend literally was a 6'6" white dude. And our other best friend was a 6 foot Black guy. We call ourselves the Rainbow Gang. We had a Black, Mexican, and a white. And so I was exposed to that early on. So it was never been an issue for me. But the reality is, though, the brute reality is, if you're growing up in the Midwest, you literally might not have ever met like an Asian person or something, or there might be one person in your high school. So of course, if you haven't had those kind of experiences where you're interacting with people and
Fear of the unknown. Yeah,
absolutely. I would say that fear. Xenophobia actually gets, and I actually discuss this in the book, Jeff. Xenophobia is too frequently associated with being racist, but the reality is that the actual etymology of the word is just having a fear of the unknown. And so, unfortunately, for a lot of people, that's just exactly what it is. It's just, people, there's a reason why most people drive the same way to work every single day. Even though there's multiple ways to get to work, people will take the same route. And so in the book, I said, hey, try to get out of your comfort zone. Try to, brush your teeth with your left hand, take a different way to work. Try, Netflix has a bunch of different international shows. Check that out. Check out an ethnic restaurant. These little small things we could do can really go a long way as far as getting us out of our little small, closed-minded mindset that we can all be guilty of, honestly.
I love diversity. I think that the world would be extremely boring if everybody was white. That's, and sadly, that's what the white power movement wishes for, but I've never really understood that. Diversity is what keeps things interesting, I think.
You know what? I'm not a first of all, I love your tattoos and your dreads. I have quite a few myself. Not dreads, but tattoos. But I will say this, that I don't want to sound, I don't ever want to sound like an apologist for people who are in the movement, but I can understand a lot of their fear and anxiety that I think a lot of them would feel. Because I live in South Korea, where like 99% of the people are of one ethnicity. So I can understand the desire for homogeny, and South Koreans, they definitely have an aversion, a fear of foreigners, because they've been invaded so many times by other countries. So they have, I would say, a lot of them genuinely have a fear of what is like xenophobia. They genuinely have a genuine fear of foreigners. So I talk about that, and it's not specifically that you hate the people, but it's when you get abused by people by foreigners, as South Korea has in their history, and then also the fact that a lot of them like are anxious, have anxiety to speak in English. So if you go up to someone like me, they see I'm a foreigner, and you try to talk to them, they generally get fearful of it because they don't want to make a mistake or something. So even if they can speak English, they might not even talk to you at all. So they're, I don't think that the white supremacist groups, I don't want to make excuses for what they do or anything that's related to hate, but I can genuinely understand some of the anxiety that they might be experiencing, or their desire to be around everyone else who looks like them, because that's more comfortable. And so I even though I understand it, I don't agree with it. But yeah, hatred or anything like that is never okay.
They bring an element to it.
Absolutely.
And I think that I would guess anyway that the South Koreans, they're nervous, but do they really hate the people that are not like them? Like the white power movement, I mean, they can say all they want that we don't hate, we just love our own, and that's a bunch of BS. Like, I know I was around it my whole childhood, and that's just the typical response they always have, repeating that over and over again. But when there's the element of hate with it, acceptable.
Well, that's why whenever I talk about, I'm trying to make it clear, I don't think what they do is right, but I understand. For example, I'll just give you one example. As an American, being from California, we've been trying to set up for the last like 15 years a bullet line going from like I think San Francisco like down to LA, and it has taken, I'm not sure if you've heard of this train, but they just cannot get it done, and they wasted tens of billions of dollars on this. And when I come to Asia and I see they're just throwing these up every which way direction, I'm like, there's no way we're going to compete in the long run with these people. So I could totally see why people would have that fear of being replaced. As an American, I see it, and I see like in China, Japan, Korea, and I see the amazing technology that they have here. And I could genuinely see, like, I could just see very, very easily that America can only be on the top for so long. And it's just a reality. I don't have the same level of anxiety about it, because for me, I'm like, I don't live in America. My daughter's a Korean citizen. So I'm not as nationalistic as most Americans, but I would say that I could definitely understand a fear of saying, hey, we're not going to be number one, or we're not going to be the majority forever. And that's okay. Like everyone else, I've been a minority my whole life as a Mexican. So it's not the end of the world if we aren't no longer number one or something like that. It's not going to be the end of the world. Let's say that.
So you're saying you're basically that this xenophobia and this is based on fear, and I agree with that as well. And it's not just a white thing or anything like that. I mean, this is cross cultural, and I think it's important that you pointed that out as well, like with the South Koreans and that it does boil back down to fear, and that's something that we've been saying a lot of. It's fear of the unknown, and it is hate sometimes. I agree with you, Jen, on that. It's definitely, I experienced a lot of that too, but I think a lot of that boils back to the root cause, I in my opinion anyways, for not for all, but for a lot of people, is that fear component, you know. So I think that's important. So that would I want to ask you about your book too, but I had another question that just popped into my
Yeah.
head about, and we're talking about xenophobia and fitting in places and belonging, I guess, is another way to look at it, a sense of belonging or family, and that's a cause as well. How was it for you as a, you know, Mexican American moving to Korea when you first got there? How was that as an experience? Because I do know it's a fairly ethnically and racially homogenous uh or unique society where it's mostly just Koreans there, as you mentioned. So how was that for you? Did you experience racism or anything like that, or was it more xenophobia? I'll let you talk. I'm not going to put the words there.
Yeah. Well, actually, my second book is called American Abroad, Tales of Re-Education on a Road Less Traveled. And it does talk about that whole experience that I had, because actually, I will say this, growing up, we grew up culturally white. Like, our parents didn't teach us Spanish because they thought, ironically, they thought that would actually hurt us. Who would have seen the future where in California, 40%, or, you know, they're now the majority, but who would have saw that future happening? But they didn't want us to be saddled by that. So I remember very specifically growing up wanting to be white myself. Like, I did used to have hair at one stage of my life, but I used to imagine it being blonde. And to imagine it being, I actually write about this in the book. Part of it was due to a lot of the movies and seeing people like Zach Morris and wanting to have like blonde hair like that dude, even though his hair was actually dyed as well. But so there's that. There's a technical term for this, which is called being third cultured, where you're not like, you're just stuck somewhere in between. Like, missionary kids usually experience this. So I grew up extremely disconnected to my roots, absolutely hating cultural events like Dia de los Muertos. I thought that was the most savage and evil thing that humans would participate in. But now as an adult, after losing my mother and grandmother and stuff, I find Dia de los Muertos to be an absolutely beautiful time of remembrance, celebration of life. But I did grow up a bit of that hating my ethnicity. And so when I got to South Korea, I attempted to over assimilate to the Korean culture, you know, and that goes to eating the food, learning the culture, you know, the language, and at some point realizing like, man, I am never going to assimilate to this. Even if I do everything 100%, they're never going to accept me as being like an actual Korean. So that did cause a giant identity crisis. But, you know, Korean people are actually, they're very loving, very kind. My wife actually, her mother actually asked me to marry her, to become a part of their family. And she literally said, I want you to be my son and I want to be your mother. And that was like an amazing thing that I was not in a stage in my life where I could have accepted that, because we did get married and we did get divorced within a year. But after 5 years, I went back to America, had a religious experience, found Jesus Christ, and I came back, and she got pregnant the night I got back after 5 years. And our daughter was born right in the Olympics here in South Korea, in Pyeongchang. So I have been more incorporated and engrafted to Korean society, but it's been a process. It's something that's been 10 years in the making, and there's a lot of self-denial and you know, identity crisis that happened along the way. But I mean, I'm in a good stage now, have work that's rewarding. You know, I reunited with my wife. But you know, it's like, I'm gonna give you an example right now between Eastern and Western thinking that can really throw us for a loop sometimes, because it is hard to understand that Eastern thinking, they have a totally different way of thinking. And so Sunday, actually, I went to get my daughter a Halloween mask, and like literally anything pertaining to Halloween was totally scrubbed from any store. And I was totally shocked by that, because in America, that something like that would never happen. Like, we'd acknowledge the tragedy, but the rest of society wouldn't like take a bullet for that, you know? And in South Korea, they're like, this might, I don't know if they might trigger something. That's another weird thing about that event. Like, in addition to it being horrible, like a lot of those people were dressed up in Halloween costumes, you know?
So
So
it was a
that must have
Halloween
been just,
event. It was a Halloween event where they had that,
yeah.
where all those people passed. Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so there a lot of people were dressed up in costumes. So like, in addition to everything else, imagine like having to do CPR or whatever, and someone who's dressed like a witch, and just all kinds of, you know, it's just it was a horrible, horrible event. But that's just it, like, for an American, I can respect it, but it's hard for me to totally understand why they would do that. But you know, for them, that's a way that they're processing this, to say we're going to honor the dead by not celebrating this collectively. And I think Americans can learn a lot, honestly, from their concepts of honor and respect. They can learn a lot from us, from our individualism, honestly, but I think we could definitely learn a lot from their collective mindset.
I agree. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your books. I mean, you explained a little bit, but now how many do you have, and what, and tell us about the one you're working on as well.
So I wrote a book about Haiti after the earthquake. I went to Haiti and started hearing some of the stories of the children who lost their parents during the earthquake. And yeah, so I started hearing some of their stories, and I thought, like, this is really powerful stuff. And so I thought about putting their stories together in a book, collecting them. And in the process, I learned a lot about the Haitian history, about slavery, about their being, you know, the first modern African state, and overthrowing, you know, the first slave rebellion state is, I think, the only slave rebellion state that's ever existed. And so that was a really touching thing to do, to research that and to give these children a voice. And then the second book was American Abroad. I touched on that, but it had a lot to do with my travels and, you know, just experiencing epiphanies along the way and having self-discovery. I talk about, in this next book, I talk about experiencing a journey of caves and mountains and deserts. And I say that, and then I saw some really beautiful places as well, referring to myself as exploring these internal parts of myself. Those are the caves, the dark recesses of my soul that, you know, we experience trauma or whatever it is that we might grow up, the socialization of our family, society. And a lot of that stuff gets foisted on us, and we never really make a conscious effort to develop either a certain way of speaking to people, a certain way of conflict resolution, a cultural, food, music, movies, whatever it might be. And so for me, being able to get outside of my proverbial shoes and skin in another country has really taught me a lot about humanity. And so this book, I mean, I just will say this, I've done what I could, which isn't very much sometimes, to help you guys out beyond barriers, because I am a missionary myself here, so I don't have a giant budget myself. But I thought one way I could definitely help you more is by writing this book and donating it to your organization. And it deals with kind of some uncomfortable conversations about race that most people don't want to have. And really what I basically, some of the points is making, like, we can avoid this issue, we could dodge it, and we could placate it, but it's going to keep coming up over and over and over again. I call it a two-ton elephant that is in every household, in every church, in every school, and that nobody really wants to address, which is you know, the race issue. One, I also talk about actually music, and country music actually winds up playing a theme in the books several different times. But I talk about kind of like doing a two-step where we're kind of like, we think that we're addressing the issue, we're kind of just going around in circles with it. and never really making actual progress. And but I, another theme that winds up coming out is the square dance, where you have four different people and four different groups, and you're interacting with the other. You switch partners, and maybe a partner has different moves or steps, and they can teach you things. And that's basically what I say. What should be our mentality is interacting with people, learning, and teaching and learning. That's like that's a big theme in it. One other big theme I will say is empathy. Empathy is probably the number one theme that runs throughout the book, which is to say that, hey, we genuinely cannot understand each other 100%, because we all grew up in different environments and with different parents and siblings and different culture, different times. But the more that we can have respect and try to see myself as like a disembodied me, like I talk in there about the book, is like if let's say I switch spots with you, Jeff, I put myself, like I was physically in your spot, and then I saw me. How would I treat me? That needs to be the way that we think about these issues, because no one wants to get treated, a certain way for something we have no control over. Say we hated someone because I'm bald. I'm bald, you're bald, you're mostly bald. You're thinning a little bit on the top there. But imagine that, or imagine if someone from the 2500s came and hated us because we were born in this era, or the 1500s, something we had no control over. We wouldn't like that very much. So doing that to other people is not something that's very helpful,
Very well put. Very well put. And hey, I wanted to thank you too. You've done a lot for the, Beyond Barriers organization, and helped us out a great deal of software and all kinds of things. And that really means a lot to us. And I want to give you a shout out for that. You've been incredibly supportive of our work, and we love you, man.
Oh, Jeff, I do want to say this. I was introduced to you by another guy by the name of God, a grumpy old dude. And he's a former, and he sent me your profile, and I had some kind of premonition, like that you were going to have some kind of impact in my life. I had no idea the level that would actually take place, but it was like, I don't get those premonitions often, but I just saw it from literally from like your profile picture. And it's been my honor. My biggest regret is that I haven't been able to do more for you guys. So I think with this book, God willing, it could help get some resources to you guys, and then just open people's eyes out to the work you're doing, which I think is absolutely phenomenal.
Likewise, it's important, the work you're doing, and a good shout out there for grumpy old dude. That's somebody I haven't talked to in a little while. He's a good man though. I hope he's doing well.
God for short, by the way.
God,
you just call him God.
God.
Jen, you got any thoughts?
No, I just like the way you focus on empathy, because that's like one of my biggest things that that I think our society here in America anyway lacks empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's awful. Like even for me, I work with the elderly through Medicare, and I can't understand, like, as I take these phone calls, I have to have empathy for these people. And there are some people who, do what I do, and they have zero empathy for people. And it just blows my mind. I don't think it's something you can teach. I kind of think you either have it or you don't, especially, or at least as a child growing up,
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to kind of be raised to care about other people and have empathy for them. And I think we're lacking that in this society, and it's just really sad.
I definitely think that you can't. I actually do agree with you in the sense that you can't teach it, because it's something you have to personally experience. It's something that it doesn't matter how much I could tell you about what I've experienced interacting with foreigners and stuff around the world. You need to have those experiences. Go out of your way to meet foreigners and stuff. And I'm a foreigner here, so I know what it's like to be on both ends of that side. And I know what it's like to be both rejected and accepted. So it's something that, yeah, no matter what I've done, no matter what I'll say to you, you have to have those experiences yourself. But one of the conclusions that I reach in the book is that empathy is actually impossible to understand from anybody else, because no matter what, you're always going to be with a very limited perspective that we all have. And so we're all biased towards our own actions. That's a blind spot that we all have. We're all willing to condemn other people, and yet try to make excuses for the kind of things that we do. Like we're willing to see other people's mistakes, and yet we'll look for our intentions, what we're trying to do, or we'll justify things that we do or say or think. And so starting off for me with the book is to genuinely understand that I'm not going to be able to fully understand other people. And if we come to that conclusion, then we can start to have some humility as we talk and interact with people. And I will give you one example real quick, because I was working in a company with the lady from Taiwan, and every week I'd bring in like bread or oranges or whatever, and give them out in the office, and I'd always ask her if she wanted one, and she'd always tell me no. And I talked to my boss. I'm like, hey, I really think that this person, and we actually clashed heads several times. And I really, I told my boss, I said, hey, I don't think this person likes me. And he goes, Isaiah, you know what? This is like a cultural problem here. For them, it's rude to just accept something like that. Like they should reject it. And he's like, if you really want to, whatever her to have, he says, just leave it on her desk as you're leaving, right? And so when I started doing that, every day I'd come in and it was gone. She would eat whatever it was. And so we went out for like an office party, and I told her, I said, hey, you know what? I said, I'll just call her Min. But I said, hey, you know what? I said, my daughter's getting ready to get born right now, and I really don't understand my wife a lot of times. My wife's Korean. And I said, I have some anxiety that I'm not going to be able to understand my daughter, because as a man, it's just hard for guys in general to understand women. And so I said, but I really want to. I said, I've never done anything to intentionally try to offend you, but obviously we've had some bad blood, and she told me something that like I will never, ever, ever forget. And I couldn't even understand what she meant at the time, but with some more thought and reflection, it's really helped me to understand more about empathy. But she says, Isaiah, you just got to understand the limits of yourself, like understand the limits. And I didn't understand what she meant by that, but with more reflection, I've come to understand that there's absolutely no way I'm going to be able to understand an Asian woman in a sense of having an unfiltered view, the way that a woman would, with vulnerability or culture, whatever it is that she's got going on there. Because even if I make the attempt to try to understand where she's coming from, I'm going to always be looking at that from my own filters of myself. So I'll never have like a knee-jerk response that she would actually have. I might get there eventually to understand it, but that's going to be after layers of digestion and layers of empathy that I'm going to have to subject myself to. And so when I understood that, I'm like, wow, this gives me so much more patience and try to interact with people, realizing that they're not going to understand me as well. They wouldn't understand how I've been socialized and raised, in America, as a minority in America. So that door, even though that seems like a very simple and maybe too basic door to even talk about, it is so essential for me and the work that I do to really try to see the person as just another me out there who's doing the best they can to process things and to learn and to grow, and who has trauma maybe mental health issues and stuff. And so I just have to have a little bit more compassion and a little bit more compassion and patience in dealing with people. I'll say that.
No, that's a great outlook and a great way to share there, because that's something I think we can all learn from and that we should all be doing, and I think of things like that too, like where someone in a scenario where like a woman might scream or something, like a panic, like in a scary situation, and I always think to myself, man, that's stupid, because I always remain so calm. Like, why did this person scream?
Mhm.
How is that going to help anything?
Mhm.
But it's exactly what you said. It's the way they deal with a scenario. We all deal with things differently. Where we're in a scenario like that, I remain calm. Somebody might look at me and say, "There's something wrong with this guy. Why is he calm when a tornado
Right.
is coming at the house or whatever?"
Right.
And that sort of thing. So it's all about perception. So thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it's a great way of. My story is a little funnier, I think, but no, it was great, man. Thank you so much for sharing that. And the books, we definitely want to know more about these, where people can get them, the ones that are already out. So now you have two that are out, if I'm understanding this right, and then one that's in the works that we talked about.
It's getting edited right now, so yeah, that one. It's called it's called Why Race in parentheses Doesn't Matter, because people always talk about race matters, but that's the title of it. Why Race in parentheses Doesn't Matter. Why it doesn't matter. I mean, it's something we need to think about and consider. We need to be sent, like people talk about being colorblind. That doesn't really make any sense, because it doesn't make any sense, and we shouldn't treat people differently. Like if I walked into your house and took off my shoes, you would probably find it disrespectful. But if I walk into someone's house in South Korea and I keep on my shoes, they're going to find it. They're going to be like, "Go outside and take off your shoes." Literally, people do not wear shoes indoors.
No shoes in my house either.
What was that?
I said no shoes allowed in my house either.
Oh, really? Okay. Because of the carpet?
Yeah. Well, anything.
Yeah,
Even if it's a hardwood floor, I just think it's disgusting.
Yeah, so they don't have.
I agree with them.
They don't have carpets here. Like everyone has like linoleum or hardwood floor. But yeah, it's incredibly clean, and nobody wears shoes indoors here. So that's something that if I was going to say, "Hey, I'm going to treat everybody the same," they're going to find it extremely disrespectful. And so you got to be aware of the differences, respect those. But at the same time, whenever it comes to like judgment, there's a reason why Lady Justice is depicted as having like being blindfolded. And we don't want to, as I call it in the book, we don't want to peek through the blindfold that's there. We can cheat, we can look through it, and we could try to distribute justice or acceptance or love, appreciation. We could try to do that from a lens of basing that on skin color, but ultimately that's going to get us in trouble, and we certainly would not want it done to us. We certainly would not want people, and I've been on both ends of that here in South Korea, because even if you're American, which we have like preferred status in South Korea, actually they have no idea that I'm Mexican here. Here I'm just white, unless someone's been to America and they understand like what Perez means, they don't really know that I'm Mexican. So it's just, but either way though, it's just like, I'm not Korean. Like it doesn't matter, black, Mexican, white, whatever it is, you're not Korean. So there's that, like you're always going to be an outsider. So if you've ever been treated with disrespect or xenophobia or prejudice, racism, if you've ever experienced that, you will know that it's one of the worst feelings in the world to experience, to be judged from something you have no control over. And what I talk about is like, how would you like it if someone from another planet, galactic system out there came to America and just said all humans are bad? We would find that horrific. Or if some time travelers came, humans from 500 years in the future or something, and they just said, "You guys are anybody from this era is wrong. And we can do that sometimes. We could look back into the 90s or the 1800s or whatever and say, oh, what they were doing in this era was racist, or there's a really big push to do that inside of movies or music from like John Wayne, or I'm sure Elvis has gotten some stuff, but people, it's not really appropriate to project what we know now back to people who are practicing science to the best way they knew, in the 1800s. They were doing the best that they could with the knowledge that they had. And so they didn't have access to the same level of technology, science, internet, things like that. And, what I'll say is that people are doing the best they can with whatever resources they have at the time. So that's going to vary from person to person, but to understand that we're all frail, we're all humans, we're all going to fail. We're all filled with pride, with prejudice. And Dale Carnegie put it amazingly that like we're humans, and we're bound to be filled with things like ignorance about a lot of topics. Statistically, we don't know 99.9% as humans of what there is to know in the universe. We're all have this little small piece of pie that we're trying to see the world through. Like we all have a straw, and we're literally looking through it, and we think that we're seeing the whole picture. But the way I describe it in the book is just having like binoculars with straws, and we're literally like just looking around, and we're just seeing very small glimpses and pieces of, the universe and the world. So we got to have that humility in dealing with people, because if we do, I think it'll really move us along to as a species. It's something that we really have to understand as a non-American, Korean, Black, white, Jew, Muslim, like as humans. This is a human issue.
Really well stated. Before we close out the program, either Jen or Isaiah, is there anything else that you guys would like to cover or mention?
Jen? I'm a little winded because I've been speaking a lot.
You said something interesting that you don't believe in the phrase colorblind.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, colorblind would be, I gave that as an example with the shoes, but okay. So the second book, I talk in there about committing faux pas, which is like cultural missteps. For example, if I try to shake a Muslim's hand with my left hand, they're not even gonna shake my hand, because that's, they wipe with the left hand, so they're not gonna shake my left hand. So if I went up to Muslim and I'm for example, I'm left-handed, and say, well, I'm just gonna shake with my left hand no matter what, with your Muslim, Jew, Black, white, whatever, that would be an example where being colorblind or try to pretend that everybody's just the same, that would be inappropriate. For example, in South Korea, you're supposed to give something with two hands like this, okay? It's a very gentle, you give like a bow and you give it, right? So gentle. Like if you think about it, it would be really awkward for someone to take something really quick out of your hand and then leave. Whereas you could do that really easy with just one hand. So when I first got here, my boss, she came to present the money that she needed to give me. I'm like, all right, thanks. Just grabbed it and walked away. And then she told, because she couldn't speak English, but she told my coworker, like, oh, I think Isaiah is really rude, something like that. And then she told me, and I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea about this, right? That this is a cultural thing. And on another occasion, I met a Korean woman. Her name is Sue. Probably the first Korean I actually met here. And it's really important in Korean society to establish how old people are, because there's various ways to speak to people. This is really common in Asian societies, that like they'll have literally talk to people older, the same age as you, and then like children. So you need to establish who's older in a conversation. And so she asked me, and I asked her how old she thought I was. And she said 32, and I was only 25 at the time. And I was like, it threw me for a loop. I'm like, I can't believe she thinks I'm 32 years old. And I said, well, why do you think that? And my hair was receding pretty far back at the time, and I was doing the comb forward. This is back when I had like enough hair to actually pull it off. No one in America ever mentioned it, but it was obvious. I had these gaping holes, like Jeff over here on the side. But when I comb it forward, I had convinced myself that nobody noticed it because nobody said anything. And then she just like, oh yeah, because you know, your forehead is so big. That's literally what she told me. And I looked at her and I'm like, that's really rude. I said, I'm really sensitive about my hair. I'm like, I can't believe you just said that to me. And then she like broke down. She was like, I mean, she felt like dishonored. I mean, I could just see her eyes get like watery, and she was just pointing out an obvious fact that my hair was receding. And to her, for them, that's just a reality for them. They might say, you know, I've been around a lot of them. They're like, yeah, you're fat. You need to do some sit-ups, or you need to diet or something. And for them, that's not being rude. It's just, that's just how they talk about things very frankly. And so Margaret Cho has this hilarious skit where she talks about bringing her boyfriend around, and her parents are like, oh, your eyes are so big. What are you trying to do? Like catch flies with your eyes? Because they'll say things so directly, and we'll interpret that. We will definitely interpret that as being rude. But for them, it's not. They're certainly not trying to be offensive, just in the same way as I wasn't trying to offend my boss. But I did, you know, these things can happen. And so to just say, I'm going to treat everybody the same doesn't make sense. Like, we should take into account cultural considerations. But as far as being colorblind, like as far as, you know, treating people with dignity and respect, that element should definitely be colorblind. Like, we shouldn't say, oh, I'm going to treat someone better because they're white. I'm going to treat someone better because they're American. We should be aware of it, but not, it should not dictate, you know, our level of love and respect for people. I will say that should be equal.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. For me, it's like the whole colorblind thing is, I feel the same way you do. I just kind of word it differently, I guess, explain it differently. Of course I see color. We all see color. I'm white, you know, the next person is black. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because we can enjoy that. Yeah, I don't know exactly how to explain how I feel, but, you know, celebrate, you know, each person as they are is basically what I'm trying to say.
Actually, I will share one final thought from the book. Don't want to share too much, but you have to read the whole thing for yourself. But I talk about, in middle school, we're taught about America being like a melting pot or a salad. And really, though, that's basically the way I describe it, is that that's really a way you'd want to describe it to a child, someone who's not very well mature. If we start to think about it more, that it doesn't really make sense for everything to get blended into one, because if you do that, there's no way to actually tell where is something uniquely different about, say, like Korean, for example, their food, their music, their history. If you're not taking the time to actually study whatever it is, or, you know, learn about them, try to, maybe through K-pop or K-dramas, people like to watch those, but to be able to distinguish, this is unique, this is beautiful. And the way I describe it is, if you think of like a melting pot, I would describe that as like a soup, where you just mixed everything and you blend it into one, and that's a soup. Okay. And then you have a salad.
Whatsoever anymore. Everything will be the same.
What you have is, you also have a salad. And yet the reality is that unless you're vegetarian, neither of those are actual meals. You know, people, that's a starter. You start off with, it's a starting point. And so for me, I talk about how some of the best music genres, and I'm sure Jeff will probably know a lot more about this, but it's come about by mixing different ideas, with blues, country, all that getting mixed into, having its roots in bluegrass. And actually music is a really common theme in the book. When I talk about how it shouldn't be like embarrassing, or we shouldn't be afraid to admit that there are these differences, and we can take some of these differences and mix them together. Like when we got married, for example, we had Korean Mexican fusion food. We had bulgogi, kimchi next to rice and beans. And then I call my daughter's the ultimate fusion of Mexican and Korean. And so by recognizing these differences and being able to sample them, like being able to sample other cultures, we have to be able to demarcate that these things exist, they're different. And it's a starting point. Like when we're able to interact, we're able to take, like, for instance, think about K-pop. K-pop is like one of the biggest phenomena in the world. And that's Korean music. If you were to listen to Korean music 50 years ago, you would not want to listen to Korean music. It's god awful. But they've taken elements of American music and they've created something different, which is amazing. So I think that part where I really talk about us getting in and mixing it up, and not being ashamed, not being afraid to admit these differences are there, and we can appreciate them, we can love them. People talk so much about cultural appropriation. I think cultural appropriation is one of the most beautiful things on the planet. We got married in traditional Korean clothing. Yeah, we did. We got married, and maybe I'll have to put a picture up, Jeff. I decided not to get married at all in Korean. I mean, in a tuxedo, or so yeah, that's how we got married. And so being able to interact with this all over the world, I think it's beautiful that if people cannot travel, being able to eat the food, being able to go experience, to celebrate culture, even other people's religions, to go participate, whether it's a synagogue, whatever, these things should exist, and we should be able to recognize them individually and participate in them. I think that's one of the greatest ways to overcome racism, in my opinion.
Perfect way to close out the program. Thank you so much, Isaiah Perez, for coming on the program. Everybody want to check out his podcast. It's RHE, Respect, Humility, Empathy Podcast, and it's in the description. Thanks again for coming on the program, Isaiah.
Thank you so much for having me. And Jeff, keep up the good work. You have a booster here, you have a supporter, you have a fan. I'm your biggest fan. I may hate on you a little bit every now and again online, but man, it is all out of love. You've done so much more than I ever thought that you would do in this short amount of time. So I can't wait to see what you can do in the future. I personally believe you are a game changer. You're a world changer. You're going to do something amazing in this world. And I'm very glad I've been able to contribute to that journey, Jeff.
Thank you, brother.